Hey church, it's Wednesday again. If you check your calendar, it's Wednesday with Wade, as we're calling it right now. I am not Wade, but this is Wade.
Hi.
Wade is back with me. It's been a few weeks, and Wade, over the last couple of weeks, you and I have been on the road. We've done a lot of what do they call that? Windshield time.
Yes.
So we thought we'd take a minute here today and just kind of tell our church where we've been, what we've been up to. In and out of the office here the last couple of weeks. I know. So 2 weeks ago, I think we were up in Cedar Falls. So what were we doing up there?
We were participating in the Damascus Road Collaborative, which is a group of churches that are meeting together with some coaches, some trainers to kind of help us learn to establish a vision and to move forward with that vision. And this time the focus was on being an invitational church. And there's a lot of aspects to that, but the main aspect that we really focused on was being a church that offers invitation to life change. If the church doesn't have transformation and life change, then it's a country club.
Right.
And so that was an emphasis that we really focused on. And really one of the big parts of that, and y'all have heard me beat Matthew 28 to death in the last 3.5 years, but the idea of go therefore and make disciples. If we're going to make disciples, people have to become followers of Christ to become fully developed disciples.
Right.
And so we have to invite them into relationship with Jesus. And some churches have shied away from doing invitations for fear of calling people out or making people feel uncomfortable. And part of this process was just saying, look, as the church, we need to invite people into relationship. And if we're not doing that, again, then what are we here for? What's our purpose?
Right.
And it's not just about having people walk an aisle. It's about seeing people transformed by the power of the gospel.
Yeah, I know that was such a, maybe something that we've heard before, but it was in such a refreshing way and a good refresher and reminder as well. So much to unpack, and we don't want to spend the whole day doing that, but the one thing I want to kind of touch on for a minute is the idea that it wasn't a new idea, but the idea that in evangelism, the gospel does not change, right? The gospel is the gospel. But how each of us are led to respond to the gospel is going to be where we're coming from in our experience, either what we've struggled with or what our upbringing was like, and that sort of thing. I know you and I have different stories of how we came to Christ, and how the gospel clicked for us for the first time. So talk about for a second how, when we think about it as a church as a whole, let's think about Sunday morning.
Okay.
And in our service. Obviously, you have people in the church who everyone comes from a different place, right?
Right.
So how do you, in a way that isn't boring, or maybe boring is not the right word, but not in a, obviously the Holy Spirit does the work,
Right.
but how do you think from an invitational perspective, trying to invite a vast group of people, what do you think that looks like?
Well, for me, one of the things that I've tried to emphasize, and I don't know how great of a job I do it with that, but even as we start the service, I always invite people to join me in prayer. Because maybe what they need that day is not a salvation experience. Maybe they've already come to Christ,
right.
and what they need in that moment is just the power and presence of the Spirit in their lives. So to invite them into joining us in prayer, and then to invite them to join us into worship. I mean, this is part of our core beliefs here
right.
at Grandview, that,
right.
that we want to focus on welcoming and worshiping and the Word and the work and all those hand signals we get to. But it looks different for each person. So as we get to the time, specifically the time that we offer there at the end of the service, our response time, we offer the invitation to come pray. I offer the invitation for somebody to come talk to me and ask for specific prayers, or maybe they want to give their life to Christ. One of the cool things is we've had a couple of elders that have been coming down front,
Yes.
Available for that. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, it's not about the message that I teach or preach.
Right.
It is about their response to the Spirit's movement. And if the Spirit is moving in their lives, we want them to feel available and feel open to expressing that, whether it's at their seat, whether it's at the altar, or whether it's maybe in the foyer talking to somebody and saying, "Hey, I need to move past wherever I am and into a new phase of life." And so each person though has to take that initiative.
Right.
I've used the example before. You can invite people to a birthday party, but if they don't show up, You did your part,
Right.
but it's whether or not they showed up
Right.
is what really matters. And
Yeah.
but we want that to people to feel comfortable to where they can move, whether it's to the altar, or maybe it's just to be moved to raise their hands. See, sometimes I think we take the idea of the response time to be it only has to take place at the altar.
Right.
But it can take place in your seat. It can take place with hands raised.
Right.
It can take place with tears where you're sitting.
Yeah.
Just however it is that you choose to respond to God, we want to make it available for you to do that.
Yeah. And that was something I was going to say. I'm glad you touched on it because I think it's easy a lot of times when you're maybe you had a great week, which praise God for that, you know, and you feel close to the Lord. I would encourage as church during that time, maybe spend a couple moments praying for people to respond to the Spirit's move during that time. And you know, obviously as worship leader, I want people to sing, but I'm going to give you permission in that moment. If you feel led to pray, you know, that's what that time is for. There are many times that I just want to shut up and not sing and just allow the Spirit to move, but it's also part of my responsibility to keep the song going and moving and not throw off the band. So that would just be my encouragement, is to just, you know, whether you're wherever you're at, if you don't feel led to come down front, or just like Wade said, respond how you feel led to respond. But the first thing I would encourage you to do is just in that moment, even before coming forward, maybe, unless you're like, Lord, I just need to go straight there, just take a moment to pray. Just you know, completely open yourself up to how the Spirit is leading you, and respond that way. So,
and there may be some changes to how we do that in the future.
Yeah.
You know, they gave us some methods, some ideas they thought would be beneficial, and yeah, I do want to just take a second to say one of the encouraging things they talked about was that we're actually seeing growth in numbers in churches in this moment. It's not astronomical,
right,
and it's not like we would want. But I mean, even here at Grandview, our attendance has gone up lately.
Yeah, it's been great.
And it's been super cool to see that. It's cool to see new families. It's cool to see families returning. And it's cool to see you that are here forever. We're thankful for that.
Yes.
But we're seeing some encouraging things happening, not just in our church, but in the church in general.
Yeah.
And so I know it's easy to get discouraged right now in our world as believers, but we need to recognize our hope is not here. Our hope is in eternity.
Right.
But it is cool to see that.
Right.
And it's, for me, I just want to take a second to go back to this past Sunday. You know, the song "Jesus Paid It All" right before I got up to preach. Man, it was heavy. It was heavy. You know, and I even had someone last night at men's Bible study that was like, "Man, that was just so awesome Sunday." And I caught one of the ladies Tuesday morning, and it was like, "I just wanted you to know, I saw you with your hands in the air watching the video, because you know we go back and watch the video during the week." And I was like, I said, and it was such an encouragement to me. And she first said, "I can't believe you could see me," but at the same point, she was thankful that she was an encouragement.
Yeah.
And so I want to continue to push into encouragement, man. It's going to be key for us as a church as we do move forward to recognize we're here not only to hold each other accountable, but to encourage one another.
Yeah. I think something too, and again, the last couple of weeks have run together, but I think it was at the Damascus Road Collaborative that they talked about, I don't know if it was, they used the terminology of sharing successes or what it was, but talk about for a second, Wade, we've been doing God stories for a few weeks now. We are looking for more. Maybe you can speak to that and encouraging kind of what we're, the heart is behind that. But I will just say before you do, I don't know if a week has gone by that I haven't gotten touched and emotional by hearing the different stories of what God is doing. You know, from Andy's story of being at Freddy's and sharing that, you know, and hearing from Kai and as a fellow dad, and you know, Jeanette, and you know, and everyone who I shared. You know, it's just been so cool to see people not only maybe step out of their comfort zone a little bit, but just to share with their family or church what God is doing in their life. So talk about for a second kind of the heart behind the God story, and how would you encourage maybe somebody who's like, I don't know if I have something to share. Like, how would you encourage someone in that?
Well, I need to be honest. I stole the idea from another pastor, but we was having a conversation with another pastor, and he was just talking about the idea of celebrating wins. And I was like, man, God is doing so many great things At least I feel like he is.
Absolutely,
Doing lots of
100%.
great things here at Grandview, and I was like, we need to celebrate those things. The things we celebrate will become our culture.
Right.
And if we don't celebrate wins, and instead we spend a lot of time focusing on the issues or the problems,
Right.
or as I said Sunday, majoring on the minor,
Mm-hmm.
then that's going to become our culture.
Right.
And so I want us to get to a place where we recognize the beauty in everyday life and God's impact in those moments. So, I started with the elders. I was like, hey guys, if God's done something in your life, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah.
The church needs to hear what God's doing in
Absolutely.
your life. I feel like the church gets to hear what's happening in my life every Sunday, whether it's great or not. But getting to have that happen, it's an opportunity for us to look and say, God is in every day.
Right.
Or sometimes we miss those opportunities where God's doing something because we're so focused on other things.
Right.
Just as a point of recognition, we take these things and we post them on social media so people can see them all over the world. And Jeanette White, one of the most introvert people that's taken a chance to share, has had almost 1,000 people watch her story.
It's been crazy.
About how God is working in her life, and God gives us these testimonies to affect other people, and I'm blown away by how God continues to use those kind of stories.
Yeah.
Anywhere from, again, a situation at Freddy's, or a situation at 180, or dealing with an adoption. Those are cool things that God is doing in our lives, and we don't want to miss those things.
Absolutely. So you said something a minute ago about celebrating the successes, kind of defining the culture. There was a quote I heard over the last couple of weeks. Someone said, "If the culture does not change, the church will not change." So in that same vein, kind of transitioning to this last week, speaking of culture, we went to a conference called Disciple Making Culture.
Right.
So share a little bit about that experience, just kind of an overview of where we were and all that fun stuff.
Well, if you haven't caught on, one of the biggest passions right now, and the I feel God has put on my heart, is a design for us to make disciples. And so I decided that I was going to do some searching earlier in this year about the possibility of going to a conference for this, and because I know it's more than curriculum. And so I looked up was a book that the elders are reading. This book is the staff we've read. We haven't finished it yet. We got to finish that. Written by a guy named Brandon Ginden, and he's a pastor in Texas. And it just lays out kind of how we go about having this not just be the pastor's passion, or having it be the youth or worship guy's passion, but having it be a church-wide passion. Something that is our driving force. And so, having never served in a church where that was the driving force, I was like, I need some coaching. Right. One thing that hopefully people have figured out by now is I don't know it all, and so I'm trying to learn some of it. Yeah. And I will tell you, I thought as a whole the conference was great. There were parts that I took and threw out the window because they didn't matter, and there were parts that I boxed up pretty tightly, and will be hopefully unboxing them here soon.
Yeah. So let's maybe unbox one of those things. Maybe maybe just open the lid a little bit. I know we'll probably be hearing as we move forward some things as the box is going to be opened a little bit wider, but let's maybe just take a peek. Okay. What's one thing that you want to share as one of those things?
Well, one of the things that I am confident in, that I would say I can open the box and say this is where we're headed, is there was the large focus on commitment and discipleship. Because there's times where we have made discipleship a season instead of making it a commitment. And so what we've looked at is that this would be, we may say when we take on discipleship that you disciple someone for a year to a year and a half before we say, okay, it's time for you to pick up a new disciple, and it's time for them to go disciple somebody. It's not that you can't do both at the same time. Right. But we do know that when we do seasons of Bible studies, that sometimes when the Bible study is over, you look around and you go, well, where are the other 6 people who started with us? because of a commitment issue. You know, and it may be sickness or other things happen, and those things are understandable.
Right.
But we want people to be committed to the cause and not just see that this is not something that we're going to focus on for a year. This is the direction of the church till Christ comes back.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. So I think for me, one of my favorite parts of the conference that we were just at this last week, the Disciple Making Culture Conference, was actually the very last speaker, who was Brandon. I'm not going to attempt to say his last name in this moment, but he, I mean, not only because it was probably freshest in my mind because it was the last thing, and I did take a lot of notes, so I'm kind of been refreshing here, but he talked a lot, the whole theme of his talk, and I would say my least favorite part of the conference was that they only had about 15 minutes each time to talk.
15-minute timer.
So I was like, I would have loved to listen, especially to him, for longer. But he said that words matter. And it says, he kind of gave us 3 different things about our the language that we use in defining our disciple-making culture. And I was going to just talk through these 3 points here quick. So the first one he said was define the words we use in a biblical way. And I know that's something that I know you and the elders are going to be meeting soon. Something we've talked a lot about is defining and then defining the words that we use in this cultural change and this creating this disciple making culture. What does that mean to you? What does that look like to you?
Well, one of the things that matters is if language needs to be consistent. And so what I say, okay, the gospel is this, then someone in our church should be able to repeat that. Now, here's the key, though, to that process, because as Brandon mentioned, he mentioned that we need to use biblical terminology.
Right.
And so sometimes we get lost in using other words like coaches or mentors or that kind of stuff. He said, why not just call them disciples or disciple makers? That's who we are.
Right.
But you want to make sure everybody's on the same page because from church to church, the word disciple might mean something different.
Right.
And from church to church, let's be honest, sometimes that gospel means something differently. And so we want to make sure that we're giving clear, concise definitions of these words. And it may be one of the other things you're going to bring up, so I might jump the gun here. But one of the things he talks about is the repetitiveness of that language. Is that one of the other things?
That was the next thing.
Okay.
The next thing was
have
communicate the language all the time.
Yeah.
Was the next thing.
So I don't have my notes in front of me like that.
That's okay. I'm cheating.
But one of the things he mentioned as you give these definitions, as you use these words, that if you think you're using them too many times, you probably need to use it again.
Right.
And he said often that his leadership says, no, keep saying it, keep saying it, keep saying it. And that's why I continue to use the word invite, invite. That we want to invite people to be in it, because I want that to become a part of our language here at Grandview. And I confess, I've not done great keeping up the hand signs for everybody, but that's been a unintentional thing, and I need to bring that back a little bit. I've actually had that written in my brain for the last 3 weeks. Okay, don't forget, this week we're going to remind people to welcome or to worship, and I just don't because I'm imperfect. Newsflash. But yeah, it's become something that becomes ingrained in us when we repeat things. For instance, I have a really bad habit of saying reality. And it has now become something that Jay repeats. And so...
That's what I was going to say, that, to jump in, like, you and I spent a lot of time together even before the last couple of weeks, and probably more time than you care to spend with me, but I found myself, even at first, after a couple of months, I started using Southern phrases, like I'm fixing to, or different things like that. Y'all, those sort of things. I'd be talking to Sarah, and she'd be like, what did you say? I'm like, Wade says it, I don't know. So, it's funny, but it's how God designed us, that the things that we hear consistently will just become part of our vocabulary. So I think it's so important, and I'm very much looking forward to being a part of using that language and defining that language and helping other people do that, from our kids up through our youth to our adults, because I think it's so key for us to not be a cult that we all speak the same way or whatever, but just being able to to clearly communicate these ideas and what it means to be a disciple and a disciple maker.
Well, if the target is ambiguous, then we're never going to hit the mark.
Right.
And if we want to be specific and make sure that people understand that when we talk about a disciple, we talk about the gospel, we talk about even the 4 words we're using. When we talk about work, I want people to understand that we're not talking about you're saved by works.
Right.
But it's an invitation to join Jesus in His work.
Right.
And so that's part of it. If we have to specify things, or you get lost in translation.
Yeah. So the last point that Brandon Gwendon made, Brandon G, the speaker, made of the whole of his talk of defining the language, was living the language. So talk about maybe on broad strokes, whatever you want to say, of what that might look like moving forward, or some things for our church to live the language, for us as church members and followers of Jesus to live the language of discipleship. Just talk about for a second what that looks like.
Well, one of the things it does for us is it challenges us to live outside the 4 walls of the church. If we're going to live out the definitions, I know part of the larger definition that we haven't quite hashed out, but of disciples are people who are transformed by the power of the Spirit.
Right.
And if you're transformed, you're not going to live just transformed within 4 walls. You're going to live that transformed life outside the 4 walls. And it's going to affect the people you come in contact with. It's going to affect your work. It's going to affect your family. And so one of the things we're really going to try to emphasize, and one thing I want to say real quickly is I know I can't transform people. That has to be a Holy Spirit movement. And so our hope is that by getting into God's Word together, by doing it in a smaller settings, doing it outside the 4 walls of the church, doing life together with each other, that we're led by the Spirit to begin to mimic who Christ is. The truth for all of us is that discipleship is not a Sunday thing. It is a life change. It is a culture change, not just in a church, but for each of us.
Right.
And as each of us have that individual moments, maybe we're discipling 1-on-1 or discipling 1-on-3 or whatever number gets settled on, that what we would see was people beginning to not just say this is who we are, but to actually be those things. It's easy to define yourself as something and not fulfill it. I think we see that in our world now. Often we see people say, I identify as this.
Right.
But if I'm going to identify as a disciple, then I need to be doing the things of a disciple. There was a story that was told while we were there about a young man who was with Alexander the Great. You remember that story? Mm-hmm. And in that story, he says that there's a young man with him, and they get to the battle, and the young man runs. And when Alexander the Great gets back to the camp, he asks him something, what's your name? And he says, Alexander. He says, well, you either need to man up or change your name. And so, if we're going to call ourselves disciples, then we need to truly be disciples or change our name to something else. And so there's the difference between defining and action.
Right.
So.
Well, church, I hope you enjoyed this few minutes here of kind of just sharing what Wade and I have been the last couple of weeks. We've been around, but we've been in and out, and we've had, as we said, some windshield time together, which I will just take a minute to say I truly enjoyed that time spending with you and getting to know you more and growing in our friendship and our relationship and our partnership and serving the Lord here at Grandview. Hopefully the beginning of a long partnership. I haven't missed your snoring, but we won't go there. Before we say goodbye, though, I'm going to just ask Wade real quickly to, as I said, kind of just look from a 1,000-foot view, whatever you want to say. I've said about 1 million different of those cliches, I guess. But just cast some vision for the church from what we're going to be talking about the next few weeks and what that's going to look like.
We're going to be taking the next couple of weeks to get further into defining discipleship. Some of it will be, some regurgitation from the sermon series I preached at the beginning of the year, just walking through the 4 W's and kind of seeing how we take that from outside of a Sunday morning experience to a daily life experience. And then a part of it will be, again, as you mentioned, we'll spend some time, if the Spirit leads us, to bring back some sermon texts from the week before and to say, hey, this is some areas we could have gone deeper. Like this coming week, I'm tackling 3 chapters on Sunday morning, which there's no way we can tackle all 3 chapters.
And let me just say real quick, as we were reminded at the conference, God still speaks through donkeys. But
there you go. And so we'll be spending some time where we do that. There may be some times where we bring in some people in the church that have ministry experience, or I would love to have Pastor Brian come on sometime and just pick his brain a little bit in front of everybody. But this is just an opportunity for us to do something that maybe would not only challenge but encourage. We've tried different things. I felt bad. I was like, hey, I'm going to do the thing on bounce back on my sermon from the Sunday, and then I was sick, and Jay did his Psalm 23 study, and then the 2 weeks in a row we were out, and so it kind of made it hard to fill that gap and fill that opportunity. But this is designed not for us just to talk. I got plenty of other things to do than this during the day, but the opportunity to encourage you as a church member, to push you to go further in your walk, and to recognize that Christianity is not about just sitting in a church on Sunday, but to recognize it is to follow Christ. There you go.
Well, I invite you to not just sit at home, but to see you at church on Sunday morning. Maybe invite somebody. We invite you to join us, and we look forward to seeing you. Thanks for joining us today.